uphill climb simulations and how you can use them in your training. You may remember, if you follow the channel, in my last weekly update that I said, first one of the UTMB simulated climbs. I've mapped out every single climb for UTMB up different hills around here, some on that mountain over there, and once a week I'll be doing that. You can do these climbs where it's flatter as well. That's what I've always done previously, using a treadmill. And so in this video I'm going to describe how I calculate the climbs and then how I do this in practice. I'm currently midway through my weekly climb simulation. This is the second major climb at UTMB that I'm replicating. That's a climb done. 1118 meters of climbing and 4 meters of descent. I was following some cross-country ski tracks for the last part of the climb. It all got a bit icy, so the last 400 meters of ascent or so, it was pretty slow going just because of the ice. But I'm now at over 1900 meters. So just going to have some food and then head down. Back from the run, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about why I spend a dedicated session once a week to climbing. So to put this into perspective, if you look at, say, the profile from Lavaredo, so this is from my race last year, you can see how much climbing there is. Now, if you consider that your climbing speed is slower than your flat running or descending speed, then actually the amount of time you spend climbing across a whole race is the largest proportion of that total time that you take for running a mountain ultra, for example. So if, for example, your average climbing speed was 8 kilometers per hour, your flat running speed was 12 kilometers per hour, and your descending speed was 14 kilometers per hour, then if you can make a 5% improvement in your climbing speed overall across the race time, that'll actually be a greater benefit than if you were to, say, improve your descending speed by 5%, because you're spending a lot more time climbing than you are descending or running on the flat. Now, that's not to say that you neglect, obviously, doing interval work, high speed work, and also practicing technical downhills and that type of element as well, but I would say as an individual session, the uphill ones are probably where you'll be able to make the most gains. Now, the additional benefits of doing uphill sessions, especially for these mountain ultras, whether that's on a treadmill, and I'll come on to that in a little bit, or in a real world simulation like I've been doing, as you saw in the video earlier, are that firstly, it prepares your body for those long climbs. So some of these climbs that I did at Lavaredo were taking me a significant amount of time. If I look at the first segment, for example, that was 5.17 kilometers and it took me 37 minutes. So I had done multiple sessions in the gym where I replicated that climb, the average gradient, so I was prepared for a climb of that length. So first off, physically you're able to maintain a decent speed, and some of these climbs, for example UTMB and other races, are significantly longer than 5 kilometers. At Lavaredo I think the longest was 10-12 kilometers, so I would have been doing over double that time as well. Secondly, psychologically it is a massive boost, because I had done every single one of these climbs at Lavaredo on 2 or 3 occasions beforehand. So I knew roughly how long it would take me, and also I could tell myself, well, although I hadn't physically been at the race or recce'd any of the route, I knew what was coming up, I knew how steep the climb was, and that helped a huge amount. And thirdly, it helps with them when you get onto the flatter section or the downhills, because your legs won't be as tired. So actually, by doing all of this uphill work, even if it doesn't improve your speed on the climbs, it will help you when you get to the flatter sections, because you'll be less tired, and hopefully your legs will be in better shape for the flat sections and the downhills, as I mentioned. So there are multiple benefits, not just to the climbing, but overall the whole race, it will help you. So my approach to actually creating these segments and looking at them and specific workouts is that I go onto Strava and I will look at the segments that exist currently. Now, for most of the major races, you will find most of the main climbs have already been mapped out as segments, but that's not always the case. So then the next option is to use mapping software and actually trace out the race route, look at the start of the climb, the end of the climb, the altitude at the beginning of the climb and the end of the climb, so then you can see how much you're climbing over the distance, and from that you can work out the average gradient of that climb. I'll then create each workout. Each workout will typically, if it was a treadmill workout for example, I would have a 1 to 2 kilometer warm-up run, and that may involve increasing the gradient throughout. I would then simulate the climb. So for example, this climb at Lavaredo, average gradient is 11% over 5.17 kilometers. So if I was doing that on a treadmill, what I would do is do a 5.2 kilometer section in the middle of that workout, and I'd probably do it at 11.5%. Now the reason I increased the gradient on the treadmill is obviously that's a nice steady gradient, there's ups and downs, and by increasing it by 0.5% or a percent, psychologically it helps, but also it's probably more reflective of the outdoor world because there's going to be undulations in that climb. It's not a perfectly smooth gradient like you have on the treadmill. When I'm doing the exterior, like the outside ones, the simulations, for those what I do is have to go and use the mapping software again and look at climbs. So you may be lucky enough to find segments already on Strava in your local area which match the climbs you're trying to replicate. Alternatively, you can draw out on climbs, look at the contours, that will give you a good idea on maps for example, and then draw out again routes that you think may be quite similar to the actual race route. And obviously they're never going to be perfect, but it's a very good way of replicating the climbs. Real world differs from treadmill as you're following trees and other obstacles. As I mentioned, I do 1 climb per week. At UTMB I've mapped out 10 climbs. That covers all the major climbs throughout the race course, and I'm hoping to do each of those twice before race day. So I started them in week 4 of my training, and then with a 30-week training plan, that will take me up to about week 24 or so. I'll do another couple of them, do the hardest ones again another couple of times, and then I'll be into my taper, and at that point I will no longer do the hill climb simulations. I'll do shorter climbs in the week or 2 beforehand, purely because they're quite hard efforts that you have to do. The other element in terms of doing these individual workouts is that the heart rate zones which I train in, again anyone who's followed the channel will know that I use a 7-zone system, and for these climbs I would aim for heart rate zone 4 or 5, so you're just around threshold heart rate. That would be harder than I race them, but again it helps build up not just your cardiovascular system but also muscular system. So actually by doing those in the treadmill, in the climb simulation, because it's just an isolated 1 climb an hour for example workout, then I tend to do that in the middle section, the actual climb part of that workout, in around heart rate zone 4 or 5, and then at the end of every single one, if it's on a treadmill, I'll then lower the gradient back down to 0 and have a cool down. Obviously with the real world simulation I then have a descent, but I don't go hard on the descents. I save that for the weekend long runs to save my legs, because if I hammer down the descents, for example the climb that I just did was around 1100 meters of climbing, then if I was to then race down that in heart rate zone 4 or 5, well, it would absolutely destroy my quads. So I just take a nice easy descent. I think my descent time was actually similar to my uphill time. I took my time, admired the views, took some photos, etc. So it's quite a nice easy descent back down when it's the real world simulation. I hope you found this video useful and you're able to adopt some of these techniques. It's one which I found has been an absolutely massive benefit, especially when I was living in flatter areas and really struggled to simulate the race routes in the real world or get anywhere near the length of climbs. For example, in the UK you cannot, there aren't any mountains high enough where you can actually replicate some of the climbs at UTMB. Even up Ben Nevis, it's not a long enough climb, so by using the treadmill it is a very useful tool to help you improve your uphill climbing and power hiking ability. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any future content, and I'll see you next time.